institutions and the advertising agency industry. For example, Article 12, Section 11 of the Constitution provides that no franchise, certificate, or any other form of authorization for the operation of public utility shall be granted except to citizens of the Philippines or to corporations or associations under the laws of the Philippines, at least 60% of the capital of which is owned by such citizens. Now, the resolution of both houses seeks to amend this provision by inserting the phrase "unless otherwise provided by law," so that this provision will read as follows: no franchise, certificate, or any other form of authorization for the operation of public utility shall be granted except to citizens of the Philippines or to corporations or associations organized under the laws at least of the Philippines, at least 60% of whose capital is owned by such citizens unless otherwise provided by law. The same method is followed with respect to the amendment of Article 14, Section 4, Paragraph 2, regarding the ownership of educational institutions, and Article 16, Section 11, Paragraph 2, concerning the ownership of the advertising agencies and firms and persons engaged in this industry. Now, Mr. Chairman, my observations on this resolution are two. Number one, it will undermine the fundamental principles and policies stated in Article 2 of the Constitution. These fundamental rules and policies constitute our statement of aims and goals on which our republic is founded. The second observation is that it allows the amendment of the Constitution by methods other than outlined in Article 17 by allowing Congress, acting not as a constituent assembly, but as a legislative body, to amend the Constitution by providing otherwise than is provided in the present Constitution. For example, Mr. Chairman, we declare in Article 2, Section 19 of the Constitution that we want a vibrant national economy independent and controlled by Filipinos. The proposed resolution amending the Constitution would contradict this. Number one, by allowing Congress acting as a legislative body, not as a constituent assembly, to amend the Constitution and allow the engagement or operation of utilities, educational institutions, and advertising to foreigners. That, therefore, undermines the basic principles and policies on which this republic is founded. Second, we have an amending clause, and it is basic principle that the amending clause of the Constitution is a very important part of the Constitution because it is the alternative to a revolution. Now, if we don't follow the procedures, I would say the wise procedures of Article 17, the amendment clause of our Constitution, we lose the benefits of several procedures. What are they? In my view, they require Congress as a constituent assembly, either to propose amendments to the Constitution, not Congress as a legislative body, or to call a constitutional convention. Now, there are benefits to be derived from such a procedure. Why? Because the two houses of Congress under Article 17 will have to meet as just one body without any distinction whether they are senators or congressmen, except that when it comes to the time for voting, they vote separately for the obvious reason that the members of the Senate are smaller than the members of the House. But otherwise, they are required to meet as a body. What's the benefit of that? They will have the benefit of give and take. They will debate the issues without any distinction, whether they are congressmen or senators. Not only that, having approved amendments, they will submit this to the people for ratification or approval in a plebiscite to be held between 60 and 90 days. All these benefits are lacking, totally lacking in Resolution number 6, because it will allow Congress by mere law, meaning to say the two houses voting separately in two different locations. The Senate here in Pasay City, the House in Quezon City, and they will not have the chance to exchange views, to debate. That's the benefit that you derive from that. And because of that, the people listening to the proceedings of both houses will have no chance to form opinions, so that when the proposed amendments are submitted to them in a plebiscite, they will not be able to vote wisely as they should. That's the reason I'm opposed to that. So that two things, I repeat, Mr. Chairman. Number one, Resolution number 6 undermines Article 2 principles on which our Constitution is founded, our Republic is founded. Number 2, it regards the basic principle that any change in the Constitution must be made in accordance with that provision, not by Congress as a legislative body. let me quote Chief Justice Marshall. And he said, we hear it very often said, the Constitution is the fundamental law of the land. The Constitution is the highest law of the land. Any law that is against the Constitution is void. All this we know. But let's listen to what was said way back in 1803 when these principles, the sacredness, the higher background of the Constitution were uttered for the first time in the Marbury versus Madison case, of which I'm sure many of us here have heard. This is what Chief Justice Marshall said in the Marbury case. As a superior paramount law, the Constitution is unchangeable by ordinary legislative act. If RBH number 6 is approved, we would be permitting the amendment of the Constitution by a method other than by ordinary method of legislation. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Justice Vivi Mendoza. Next, our last legal luminary to be heard from before we turn it over to our economic experts is Attorney Marlo Destura, the representative of the Integrated Bar of the Philippines. Attorney Destura, go ahead, sir.
Good morning, Your Honors and distinguished guests. On behalf of the National President of the Integrated Bar of the Philippines, Attorney Antonio C. Pido, thank you for inviting the Integrated Bar of the Philippines for this opportunity to be heard and to be a part of this historic discussion on charter change. This is also a welcome milestone in my capacity as a member of the Board of Governors of the Integrated Bar of the Philippines, a law professor, and a citizen of this country. The Integrated Bar of the Philippines represents thousands of lawyers in various sectors of the government, and whose opinion on the proposal may be relevant. So this representation will differ the opinion of the IBP on the proposed amendments on three important economic provisions of the 1987 Constitution, particularly on the grant of legislative franchise, on basic education, and the advertising industry, particularly on the restrictions on the grant, the ownership, and the allowance of foreign investors in the country by providing, as a proposed amendment in these three economic provisions of the Constitution, by inserting the words, unless otherwise provided for by law. We will look into the method proposed by Congress through an amendment by Constitutional Assembly by vote of 3/4 of all the members of Congress. We will also look into whether this proposal complies with the requirement of sufficient standard, as well as on the control on the part of Congress in enacting legislative laws, legislative actions on the proposed amendments. IBP will thoroughly study the proposed amendments and submit its position on this very important exercise of sovereignty. Hence, Your Honors, I defer the position of the IBP and commit to submit the same as soon as possible or on the next committee hearing if there be any. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Attorney. Now we'll turn it over to Dr. Gerardo Sicat, who is the first, one of the country's eminent economists and the first Director General of the NEDA in the 1970s. Dr. Sicat, good morning. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for inviting me to this important gathering on the topic that we are now very concerned with. I prepared a statement which I suspect could be read a little faster so that I can save time for most of us. I would like to say that at the very outset that I do favor the amendment of the restrictive economic provisions in the Constitution for the reason that they have been, in my view, the prominent provisions of law that cannot be changed, for which we have suffered as a nation in failing to achieve the goals of economic development over a long period of time. It has made our country more subject to greater volatility because of the failure to achieve major continuous progress in our development efforts. Those provisions have hampered this progress because we failed to invite or bring in foreign capital that is so critical to a country that has insufficient amount of savings to generate that high level of development. For decades now, we have been, I consider them to be the main cause of the country's relative decline with respect to our neighbors in the Southeast Asian region. I think you will find out that I will refer to this kind of comparison because it's critical to look at ourselves in the context of the neighborhood in which we live. As a country, I think many of our leaders now do believe that we need to undertake this adjustment in our policies. But I can see and hear, and I can hear from a lot of previous words that we have to be very careful about it. However, I'd like to be a little more bold in making some efforts to convince you that maybe we have to do much more. The economic reforms to amend the constitutional provisions have been very incremental in our case, and they arrive at a very slow pace. They cannot catch up with the need to make those changes. These restrictive economic provisions have been at the heart of our economic nationalism as a young nation, even before we became independent. At this slow process of adoption, we will become a tail ender in overall progress within the region. In any case, even if we now have more or less been on the way toward a better future because we have changed some of the policies, a more rapid adoption of the changes will accelerate further our social and economic progress. Undertaking the amendments will be the biggest boost that we need in opening the country toward more modernity, technological progress, higher incomes for our people, better employment for our workers, greater pride in our country's achievement in the economic field, and greater pride in relation to our neighbors as we restore our old position in the past. I think I've heard enough to say that there is a great distinction between a fundamental law and ordinary legislation. Let me just make the point already pointed out by one of the resource persons in this hearing, that we are the only country in this region with a fundamental law that covers the passage of laws on economic and business matters. All our neighbors, I'll just cite the 5 countries that formed the ASEAN way back in the past. We are one of the 5 countries, and the other 4 are Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, and Thailand. These 4 countries did not have anything about sacred or fundamental laws on economic relations. They just have simple, ordinary legislation for all economic and business matters. They have also understood, I think, the need to protect themselves. They're not stupid in that respect. So they have learned how to undertake all the kinds of restrictions that they needed to do. But they didn't have to put it in and set it in stone in the form of a fundamental law. The fundamental law to which we were all gathered to follow have caused us enormous pain whenever we had to undertake a need for change, whenever we have policies that required adjustments, we could not do it. We always look for the second best and the third best solutions. And those second best and third best solutions oftentimes lead the country towards greater bargaining of positions, exchange of favors, and so on. So possibly you can say that all the other things that lead to corruption and all the things that lead to the rent-seeking within the economy are fostered with this. In the other cases, well, you know, they made mistakes. If they made mistakes, ordinary laws are so easy to adjust. And so they can make a mistake and correct them within a year or 2. In our case, we made a lot of mistakes. And 8 decades from now, we realize this after the 5th decade. We made the mistakes, we cannot make the changes. We have 3 decades since the People Power Revolution, when we thought that we had changed the world. And we have not been able to we have not been able to correct them because the nation had become divided on many issues. To me, this is one of our problems. The main contents of the restrictive provisions originally were, of course, in the 1935 Constitution. We believed very much in all the things that they told us through our Filipino First policies and all that. And when we wanted to make a few changes, we never could do them. We have known this version of nationalism by the deceptively catchphrase Filipino First. Of course, it's a very nice motto. But of course, it also led us to a lot of misallocations of resources to the wrong people who could make us better off. We know the story, and I don't have to elaborate on that. From the very start, the rules developed for these provisions imparted a set of complex decision rules that could not be changed when circumstances needed change. Malaysia, Indonesia, or the 4 countries I mentioned, They have no political constitutions, as I said. They principally focused on their constitutions principally focused on the aspirations of the nation, the structure and form of their government, the duties and responsibilities of the main officers of government, and the duties and the responsibilities of the main officers. All business and economic matters were only matters for legislative agenda. That, to me, I think, is the best solution for us to progress. We have elected leaders to help protect us. Of course, some of us don't trust elected leaders. That's why we have these kinds of quarrels among ourselves. But in numbers, there will be some people who will protect. I believe that that is a better solution than having a law set in stone that we cannot change. Where have I got involved and I could not proceed a little more. But the fact is that the restrictive provision, Singapore, let me see, I got lost.
With your permission, sir, while you're regrouping, we'd like to take time to acknowledge our distinguished minority leader, Senator Coco Pimentel, also a legal luminary in his own right, and our good friend, the senator from Makati, Senator Nancy Binay. Back to you. Would you like time? We'll recognize you again.
I will. What I'll do is just keep on going because what I have said essentially can be expressed by the fact that if under ordinary legislation, if we make a mistake, we can make amends. Under our fundamental laws, if we make a mistake, we get into quarrelsome meetings that never end in resolution. To me, that is a setback for the nation, year after year. And that's why we find ourselves now behind Indonesia. Indonesia has now entered a stage where they are far above us in making decisions on national economic issues. They have made their mineral industries produce for them. They have made their forestry industries produce the papers that we use to print our boats in the Philippines. They've done a lot in this regard. As a nation, we are very slow to react to the needs of the times, and I hope that our leaders will look to the important needs of our people rather than the limited protests against powerful interests and constituencies. Our actions with respect to the easing of burdens and obstacles toward the opening of the economy for greater competition are very slow and insufficient. We have to keep pointing out that we are far behind other countries that have surpassed our economic achievements to make some elements of our policy-making institutions to move forward. As we go through the implementation of these new laws, I am not surprised if some element of society would question the constitutionality of some of the aspects of changes. But precisely because of this, we get bogged down again because projects can get stopped because we wait for the constitutionality ruling, and this takes time. This takes resources. This takes delays, and basically even the loss of projects that should have been there years ago. In fact, this alone is sufficient to remind us of previous cases in which the stoppage of many projects have happened. I can cite a few egregious examples, but I will not do that because they're already written in my note. You can read them if you want to, and I have cited them. I have listened incidentally, I'd like to just make the following point. I have listened intently to some of the members of the Senate in connection with the issue of the amendment of the Constitution. And I can sense some element of distrust on the issue. And perhaps I would like to make a comment on what I've heard. I heard that at least I've heard it said, foreign investors do not ask for the amendment of the economic provisions. That's true. They don't ask for them, but they vote with their feet on the failure of their rates of return when they enter a country. When they fail to earn their rates of return, when they fail to undertake the proper, when they get disappointed in the country, they leave with their, they make their votes. They leave or they continue with us if they like us. I heard also that the poor and many Filipinos do not understand the issue of constitutional change. On this point, I'd like to make a major note. I believe that this statement serves to sweep under the rug and dismiss the benefits of constitutional changes to the poor in our country. The poor are so challenged to improve their living conditions that they are willing to sell their votes to candidates during elections. They attend any rallies to bust them if provided with food and money for any cause and don't care much about. They seek handouts, ayuda, in many forms, only to solve their immediate problems. If they understood that this constitutional change on the economic provisions would uplift their lives and that of their children especially, they would embrace these changes gladly, I think. We have to explain these things to them. Moreover, I've heard, moreover, the fact that our young people, the first thing they do is to look for jobs abroad and not to look for jobs at home means that their aspirations are not with us because they feel that they have no hope in the country. This thing, I think, will be changed if we make the right moves to amend the constitutions that will help us bring in the foreign investments that I think will raise the level of technology and the level of employment and wages in the country as we move along. There are also comments that I heard that there are some priorities that are more important than just looking at the constitutional amendments that I'm looking for. And I've heard that it may be better to just improve the ease of doing business. That might be the route. Or to reduce the cost of energy, to mitigate the relationships, the economic hardships of the poor because of the high inflationary costs that we have. Or to reduce corruption. Well, my point is this. Various activities designed to improve the economy are likely to improve much more if we attend to the most important need that the country needs. Open the economy in the directions that will really bring the new jobs, technology, and opportunities to the people. This means liberalizing many of the aspects of the Philippine Constitution, undertaking the right changes that we need to undertake. I'd like to address the point that we have done enough to undertake reforms to meet some of the changes that we have to do I don't believe we have done so. I don't believe very much that we have done so. So I think we need to do, which is to amend the constitutional uh, 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 issues that have stymied our growth on a long-term basis. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much for a very comprehensive and history-based overview, Dr. Sikat. Salamat po. Next, we'd also like to, yes, I think we have acknowledged our colleagues here. We'd like to go to our former Secretary of Finance, for also a former three-termer of the House of Representatives, Secretary Gary Teves.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, distinguished senators, esteemed resource persons. Thank you for your invitation. We, the Foundation for Economic Freedom, have been advocating for the lifting of the restrictive economic provisions in the 1987 Constitution that have for decades served as binding constraint to economic growth and development. We believe that the removal of these restrictive economic provisions, would send a clear and compelling message to foreign investors, signaling a warm welcome to their investments and business operations in the Philippines. We recognize that liberalization laws such as the amendments to the Public Service Act, the Foreign Investment Act, and the Retail Trade Liberalization Act have been enacted in the previous administration. However, the Philippines still lags behind its ASEAN peers in foreign direct investment. Data as of 2022 indicate that Indonesia, Vietnam, Malaysia, and Thailand have surpassed the Philippines in attracting foreign direct investments. In this regard, we propose to fully liberalize, and lift the following restrictions in the 1987 Constitution by allowing up to 100% foreign ownership in the following areas, unless otherwise subsequently provided by law. Mr. Chairman, in the interest of time, I
Recording
submit
in
our statement
progress.
so that this can be useful or be used by your secretariat. These are sections 2, 3, 7, 10, 11 of Article 12, Mr. Chair. Section 4, Article 14, related to education, science, technology, and arts and sports. Section 11, Article 16 on general provisions related to ownership of mass media and advertising. Mr. Chairman, we also propose amendments to the Filipino First provisions in the following articles in the 1987 Constitution as follows. On Section 19, Article 2, Declaration of Principles and State Policies, which presently is quoted as, the state shall develop a self-reliant and independent national economy effectively controlled by Filipinos. And this is our proposed amendment, Mr. Chairman. I quote, the state shall develop a self-reliant and independent national economy, unquote. Section 10, Mr. Chairman, Article 12, again on national economy and patrimony, presently quoted as, in the grant of rights, privileges, and concessions covering the national economy and patrimony, the state shall give reference to qualified Filipinos. We'd like to propose this amendment, Mr. Chairman. In the grants of rights, privileges, and concessions covering national economy and patrimony, the state shall give preference to qualified investors. If necessary, this and future Congresses can subsequently impose appropriate limitations restrictions, conditions for ownership, or safety nets, should circumstances and conditions warrant those adjustments, just like most countries in the world and our ASEAN peers have done through ordinary legislation and not via constitutional change. The closed and restrictive model has been with us since 1935 and contributed to the inability of our country to progress like its ASEAN peers. It is high time to change the business model under the Constitution. The Philippines is the only country in the ASEAN region where restrictions in foreign ownership are embodied in the Constitution. We need to have a legal framework and market conditions that match our competitors. Increased foreign investments in the currently restricted areas would generate higher quality, higher paying jobs, boost incomes, provide greater opportunity for more inclusive growth and development for our people and the country. Mr. Chairman, various studies have shown that countries that have embraced a more open economy to foreign direct investments grew significantly faster than others who are more protectionist. There is a direct enhancement in terms of technological levels that foreign direct investment brings, which allows for the local labor force to learn from technical sources. To create a more competitive economy, the Philippines needs further adaptation to new and appropriate technology to reskill and upskill Filipino workers. And the influx of foreign direct investment can help the government in pursuing this endeavor. Mr. Chairman, we recognize that removing the foreign ownership restriction in the Constitution is necessary but not sufficient to attract more foreign investors. Other conditions such as the rule of law, good infrastructure, and ease of doing business, among others, must be present to compete with other countries in attract foreign investment. However, removing these restrictions is a necessary first step. We strongly emphasize that constitutional amendments should be limited exclusively to removing the restrictive economic provisions. This focused approach reduces the risk of political controversy and division and allows us to focus more of our efforts and energy in improving the welfare of our people. The removal of the restrictive economic provisions and subsequent influx of foreign capital would help improve our competitiveness relative to our ASEAN neighbors in terms of better and more infrastructure, telecommunications, power, and other public utilities. This would allow our government to spend more on education and health of Filipinos. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, may I also submit my statement as well as an updated talking points on the economic restrictive provisions which might be helpful to your committee.
Certainly,
Thank you
certainly.
very
We'll
much.
welcome that, Secretary Gary Teves. And if any members of the FEF also wish to come, perhaps if they have expertise in the various industries which are,
Yes.
we will have, with the permission of the Chair and the Senate President and the Senate leaders, hearings on the various industries which will be affected. So the educational, higher education, advertising, and maybe perhaps the public utilities, although really the provision on public utilities is only a reiteration of the Public Service Act which Congress just passed a year ago or 2 years ago.
We'll convey your suggestion, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Mr. Secretary. Next, we'll have the UK educated economist, Sunny Africa. Sir.
Mr. Chair, I actually have a presentation. Is it okay to flash it? It might actually make things
Yes, we'll ask the.
easier.
There we are.
Thank you. I'll be very quick. Thank you very much for the invitation. Ibon Foundation is always happy to share what we can, even if there are attempts to silence us, even under the current administration. Um, I would like to apologize for all males. If I knew that this would be the profile of the resource persons, I would have asked our female research head to come in. But anyway, um, puro lalaki kasi eh. Sa amin po, yung economic chacha is unnecessary and diversionary. So much can be done now if we're so interested and willing to develop the country, but it's also counterproductive. It distracts us from more basic changes in economic strategy needed, and actually also reduces our legal leverage to change things. I have a couple of main points, but I think a lot of them are about facts. There's I think there's wisdom to not leave economic policy making to economists. We do have some facts to blow away this fog of dogma about FDI. We strongly believe FDI is very exaggerated as a solution to underdevelopment. Development is a very complex phenomenon, as a bit alluded to earlier by Secretary Teves, but singling out FDI, including charter change, as some kind of major means development is, we believe, reductionism pushed to absurdity. Pinag-usapan yung kaangkupan. This, again, it's been distributed to the Senate. We'll be sharing it, but this chart is quite straightforward. The major countries of ASEAN are on the left side, including China. The columns are the different sectors of the economy. This is a chart based on the World Bank investing across borders, the last report they made in 2012. We updated with data from the UNCTAD Investment Policy Hub and also from the U.S. Country Commercial Guide. It basically shows that per sector, green means open, then reddish all the way down to orange, less open. The Philippines is on top because as a result of all these changes in the laws over the past decades, starting, I think, with the Mining Act of 1995, even the constitutional provisions, even without the amendment, unless otherwise provided by law, laws have provided for many opening up, many sectors to be open to the economy. So I just want to highlight this. We think it's quite important. There is no basis now to say that the Philippines is among the least restrictive economies, is among the most restrictive. On the contrary, the Philippines is now among the least restrictive economies of foreign investment in the region. That's shown by so many sectors being green as opposed to other countries having more orange and red dots. That's basically highlighting that so many countries in telecommunications, power, all the way up even to alcoholic beverages, there are restrictions to foreign investment, 20 to 80%. In many sectors of the Philippines, is 100%. We do want to address the point about flexibility. Maybe the point isn't do we need flexibility or not, but whether these provisions are needed or not. Because whether they're in the Constitution or in the law, if they're needed, it doesn't really matter about the flexibility. And I also want to disabuse us of the notion that we're more flexible once foreign investment comes in. Once foreign investment comes in, we're actually less flexible. Like a drug addict addicted to foreign capital, once foreign investment is in the country, we'll always be scared for them to go out. We'll always be scared about the disruption. We'll always be scared about the withdrawal symptoms. So I do want to stress that the flexibility argument is quite irrelevant. The point is, do we need these restrictions or not? So many other countries in the region feel they need stronger restrictions than we have right now. Next slide, please. Again, just some charts about the increasing foreign investment in the country. The argument that, oh, we're getting so much less than our neighbors is actually also irrelevant. The point is, has foreign investment been coming in? Since the 87 Constitution, foreign investment has poured in. UNCTAD reports about $113 billion in foreign investment in the country, whether in absolute terms, it increased 40 times since 1987, or as a share of GDP, it's increased 4 times as share of GDP. Foreign investment has poured into the country. There's no point saying, oh, we're getting so much less. The bigger question is, when this foreign investment has come in, has it developed the country? And clearly it hasn't. So in the parang first place, third place. Next slide. This is a very stylized way. It just shows the economic structure of the country since 1947. You'll notice, I want to highlight 3 main points. Despite the increase in foreign investment, industrial and agricultural foundations of the economy have fallen. The Philippines right now, our manufacturing is its smallest share of the economy since 1949, smallest in 75 years. Agriculture is smallest in our country's history. Again, this is despite a lot of foreign investment coming in, despite a lot of trade openness and globalization. Next slide, please. A little bit of a case study. This is foreign investment in the manufacturing sector, which was already mentioned is 100% open to foreign investment. The manufacturing sector is open to 100% foreign investment, but it has fallen to its smallest share in 75 years. It was 17.9% in 2022. The share of employment in manufacturing is the smallest in the country's entire history. Clearly, being 100% open to foreign ownership in manufacturing has not developed the Philippine manufacturing sector. To make things even worse, about 60 to 70% of our manufacturing is not even Filipino. It's actually foreign. The Philippines right now has the eighth smallest manufacturing sector. Thailand, Myanmar, Vietnam, Singapore, Malaysia, Cambodia, and Indonesia all have much higher shares of manufacturing in their GDP. Next slide. Again, a short example. Again, there's no point gloating about attracting foreign investment and thinking that it transfers technology. Intel and Hanjin were here for decades. They invested billions of dollars. They hired thousands of workers. But when they left for their own reasons, the Philippines has nothing close to semiconductor industry after 35 years of Intel. We have nothing close to shipbuilding industry after 12 years of Hanjin.